So I want to talk about something that's often closely associated with the spiritual life, and that's traditional religion. Now, if you study the history of traditional religion, you study the history of the spiritual life, one thing you will notice is that the great spiritual teachers of posterity, like Jesus, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Krishna, even Muhammad, they all were teachers of a certain kind who gathered followers unto them and taught them certain wisdom teachings in order to help them with their lives. And then later on, certain people picked up on these people and made them to be the founders of certain religions. However, these teachers, mostly without exception, did not found the actual religions that are attached to their names. In other words, Jesus didn't have a Christian church while he was around on the earth. So what that leads you to see or notice or understand is that there's a certain difference between the institutions that have been created in in the name of these teachers and what they really stood for, what they really taught, and what it was all about. Now, I'm not against traditional religion. There are certain things about it that a lot of people object to these days. As a matter of fact, one way of talking about what's going on in society today and the big cultural conflict and the problems that we have, one way of describing that is a sort of cultural clash between people who associate themselves and their cultural values with traditional religion and people who associate themselves and their ideas and their cultural values with what might be called secular humanism. And secular humanism, of course, is pretty much atheistic. It's not attached to traditional religious ideas, although in certain ways and in certain settings, it actually is kind of like a religion in many ways, and I'll talk about that later. But the point is this. People talk about the problems with traditional religion. Again, I believe realistically and objectively, traditional religion has problems, but it also has a lot of virtues. It also has a lot of good in it. It also has inspired a lot of people to do a lot of good things. And I think if you're going to look at traditional religion objectively and fairly, you have to admit that. Now, a lot of people don't like to do that because for various reasons. I mean, maybe you were raised in a traditional religious setting, you don't like that, and you feel like it made you feel guilty or what have you. And I can understand the way you feel. But again, I'd rather be fair. I'd rather be objective. I'd rather not say, traditional religion's either good or evil. And that's what people tend to do. They tend to overjudge. If you look at it objectively, what you do see is that there have been many people, like I said, over the course of time who have absorbed the teachings of the great teachers in religious settings and have applied them to their lives. Although it often is a case, unfortunately, that maybe they don't apply them as much as they could. But the problem also with traditional religion is that it creates a certain thought process in its followers too often that is associated with some pretty negative things. Things like the Crusades, burning witches. Even to this day, you have things like honor killings. You have religious intolerance, the Spanish Inquisition, persecution of all sorts of heretics. You have there are many crimes that are associated with traditional religion in the past and even in the modern day. And some people just say, well, they kind of brush that aside. And I think you can't really brush it aside. You have to understand it at a deeper level and understand what the nature of the problem is. So, although I'm going to say if you enjoy traditional religion, if you're connected to traditional religion and you want to remain connected to it for the right reasons, I'm certainly not against that. It can make you feel like you're part of a community. It can make you feel like you're connected to a tradition. It can make you basically feel as though there's something that you're a part of, and that's okay with me. I don't have a problem with it. However, there are certain tendencies in religion that I think you need to be careful of and avoid. And the first one is this. Because organized traditional religion tends to be associated with certain ceremonies like a Sunday service or a certain sacred book like the Bible or whatever other book you're going to use for other religions, or things like sacraments and rituals, or sacred buildings, or supposedly infallible leaders who are elders or a priestly class who are supposed to know everything. There's a problem that emerges, and that can be described basically as legalism, which means that people tend to think that all they need to do to be on God's side is to follow a certain set of rules that are laid down by the church, whatever church they join, and that makes them basically good. And so what they start thinking is that life is about a sort of division, like we're the good people, we're the ones who do the right thing, we follow the rules. So everybody's outside of our group, everybody who's not a member of this group, maybe you're a different religion, maybe you're a different culture, maybe you don't believe in anything, whatever else, you're the enemy. We don't like you. We don't trust you. We think you're evil, and we think you're wrong. And you see that today. I mean, you see many people on the right, most of whom are connected to traditional Christianity in this modern, well, certainly in the United States and in these modern times. And so what do they say about the people on the left? They say they're evil communists involved in an evil conspiracy to try and destroy everything and destroy morality and all that sort of thing. Well, that's not a fair assessment of the left either, any more than the left's assessment of religion is fair, which they say, well, religion is just a con game and it was just invented to oppress people, or was invented to get their money, and it's a joke and people don't even believe this stuff. That's not true either. It's not fair. Neither side has a fair understanding of the other side. But again, the problem with traditional religion, when it becomes legalistic, it becomes associated with group thinking. People stop asking questions. They start doing things without examining whether they're really right or wrong because they're told to do them. They start to just conform with what the people around them believe and are doing. They stop thinking in depth about all the big questions in life. And before you know it, what they're doing is subscribing to a sort of fear-based judgment kind of thought process. They think, again, that the outsiders are evil, they're out to get them, they're trying to destroy everything, and they're associated with the devil and all these sorts of things. So what happens next? Well, a war, a persecution, an oppression, whatever else. You see all sorts of things. Again, these things that I've talked about. You see people being sadistic. You see people putting people to death. I mean, it doesn't happen as often as it used to, but it certainly happens in certain parts of the world. And it is the type of thought process you absolutely want to get away from if you possibly can, if you're associated with religion or you want to live what I would call a spiritual life. Because if you want to live a spiritual life, you want to be free from fear. You want to have the love. You want to be about the love. You want to follow Jesus' teachings, which says to love your enemy, love your neighbor as yourself, love God, see God in everything, make peace, find peace, be kind to others, even if they're not the same as you, they don't believe the same things, and try to seek a better part of yourself. For example, if you see Jesus, just amongst many other examples, he doesn't judge enemies, he doesn't judge religious outsiders. He can hang around with people who are from another tradition, like Samaritans, for example, things like this. And even when he talks about somebody or something that isn't necessarily associated with what he believes is right, which you see demonstrated in his life, is he's not trying to be at war with anybody. He's not trying to hate anybody. And he wants to accept and be kind to everyone. And he doesn't have the same kind of thought process that I'm talking about, which can draw people in, which is to see enemies everywhere and think that, this side is part of a conspiracy, so we hate them and we'll never give them credit for anything. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. I'll say more about this as over the course of time. But if you'd like to think about what I've said here, I think it has some value and actually could lead, if more people would think about it, to more peace and people getting along a whole lot better in this world today, more on mutual understanding, many things along those lines. So, if you do want to think about it, I encourage you to do so. And if you like the video, maybe you'd like to subscribe. You could also hit like, and I'll be back again soon to talk about some things that are associated with these things. Thank you for watching.